This is what House of the Dragon couldn't bring themselves to do, I feel like.
Oh, with Alicent.
Alicent and honestly Rhaenyra too. They could not just let these women be people that did bad things for absolutely no good reason. Like Agatha truly does not have a good reason for offing all these covens. They give you understanding of her character and what sort of drives her.
What led her to this point, yeah.
But there is no reason for why she's doing this besides she's just power hungry for herself. That was really it. Crazy Stupid Podcast.
Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, if this is your first time watching, we'd love it if you could hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell so that you are aware of when we post things.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Crazy Stupid Podcast. My name is Esther.
And I'm Adrian.
And we're here today to talk about Agatha all along. Okay, well, let's talk about Agatha Harkness and friends. Honestly, witches have been becoming one of my favorite supernatural creatures to tell stories with. I really, really like it because it's so tied to womanhood.
I was a little bit surprised, at least for this show, they seem to be a little bit more laxed with not just femininity, but like sexuality as well. There were a few moments where Agatha has it with Aubrey Plaza's character where like, it was like, okay, you guys are clearly like a thing. And it didn't feel like one of those moments where like, like sometimes Disney will kind of do like the little like wink wink that there's some sort of romantic feelings, but they don't want to like go too far. I didn't feel that in Agatha all along.
No, me either. Well, I mean, the big difference is that they kissed on screen. Like that's like a thing that a lot of times they don't do. Apparently this time around they didn't care. Maybe
it's a little bit more of a lower stake because it's on the TV show. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. It felt a little bit more grown up in general.
Oh, yeah.
And it was also one of the few Disney Plus shows that I feel like anyone can enjoy. Like there's some Marvel shows that it's like, I had a good time with this and I probably wouldn't suggest it to like people that are not as into the Marvel fandom because it's just kind of niche. But then there's some shows that I'm like, this is like genuinely a good time for everyone. Like WandaVision. And I think it's partially because of the themes that it covers and the way that it covers them. And it doesn't shy away from a lot of the things and it doesn't try to adhere to like the Marvel formula.
There's a few reasons why I think Marvel is a little bit hit or miss. I think for some of their TV shows, they're just not self-aware enough. Not just the stakes. If you want to make a very grounded story, make that what it is. But I feel like sometimes they'll market something that's a little bit more grounded and then it'll start to feel a little bit too fantastical. But there can sometimes be a cap on how large the scope can be for Marvel
like
TV
Secret
shows.
Invasion.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to get to.
Yeah.
The concept, that's an Avengers movie.
Yeah. It's like, where are all the people that should be handling this massive invasion?
And so, like, I know I'm not trying to think, like, too, realistic about the TV show, but there are, like, I think, like, that's, like, a legitimate question. Like, in the back of my mind, like, it's hard for me to enjoy the show when I realize, like, there's a lot that you just kind of would, like, have to ignore in order for all this to make sense. Like, there wasn't even really mentions of these other people.
Yeah, I feel like the explanation is that the Avengers are kind of, like, not formed currently.
I guess.
I think that's kind of the explanation. But even without that, it felt like the show could not handle the scope of the story.
Exactly.
This should feel like a much bigger thing.
Yes.
And it just doesn't because the scope of the TV show just cannot really encapsulate it.
And then you only do, the 6-7 episode thing. And so, like, how much scope can you really provide for, like, 6 episodes?
Because you kind of have to wrap it up. Like, as soon as it really picks up, it's like, and it's done.
Yes. And that's why those last 2 episodes always feel like,
what?
How are you going to land the plane here?
Yeah.
For Agatha, they knew what they wanted to do with this. They understood that we're not trying to, like, make this sweeping, blockbuster sort of TV show that has this large scope. It added a lot of lore. There was a lot of Easter eggs, a lot of great chemistry between the characters. And then it also knew, like, we know the very specific story we're kind of telling. And I think that's why people seem to appreciate that.
For, like, the vast majority of Marvel projects are plot movies.
Yeah.
Like, or plot stories where, like, the purpose of this is to move the story further along in whatever direction they're going. And I don't mind that. as you guys know, I have a great time. But this was definitely more of a character story. It moved the plot kind of, like, in terms of the larger scale of things. Like, it does kind of explain some of the repercussions of WandaVision and things like that. But truly, at its heart, it was just a story about these women, plus Wiccan, about their experiences and how their experiences have formed them as women, and about their need for sisterhood and community. Like, that, you could tell that was the purpose of the story. So you weren't bothered by, like, where is it going? How are they going to do this? How does it tie into all this other stuff? That, to me, was not even the focus that I had as I started watching the show, because I was invested in the actual characters.
Yeah.
And that's not something that Marvel does that often, honestly.
I also like that they didn't try to make Agatha redeemable.
Yeah, I was relieved with that too.
When they kept hinting at this backstory, I was like, oh man, you're going to make this become this thing where, like, it's entirely just misunderstood. But they didn't go that route. And I appreciate that, because that would feel very on brand for Marvel. You know?
Yes. When we watched was that the second to last episode where we got the backstory?
Yeah.
When we watched that, when it was done, I honestly was like, this is what House of the Dragon couldn't bring themselves to do, I feel like.
Oh, with Alicent.
Alicent, and honestly, Rhaenyra too. Now, okay, the show's not done yet. We'll see what they do.
Sure.
But I think, like, so far in the story, I feel like that's what they could not bring themselves to do. They could not just let these women be people that did bad things for absolutely no good reason, right? Like Agatha truly does not have a good reason for offing all these covens. They give you understanding of her character and what sort of drives her.
What led her to this point, yeah.
But there is no reason for why she's doing this besides she's just power hungry for herself. That was really it. Like, she says it's about survival, but you watching it know that's not true. Like, she's still interesting, and I really enjoyed Catherine Hahn's portrayal of her. I had a great time. I enjoy her. I like her character. And also, like you were saying, her actions are not redeemable.
You can add depth without trying to make them so complicated that it's like we don't know what to do with the character. I think this is kind of what it felt like a little bit. And I remember we were kind of holding out hope a little bit with Alicent's character. And I know that, like, there is only so much you can kind of do with her character based off of the books, but there were moments where it was kind of like, I don't know, man, it can't all just be rumors and hearsay, and like none of this stuff was just like objectively true. And I think that was kind of the route that they went of, like, yeah, these things happen, but like there was all of this complicated misunderstandings which created like a false perception of Rhaenyra and Alicent, which I get why they try to go that route. I just think it's not really as clever if it happens over and over and over again for every major incident, you know?
Yeah, and also if you're never willing to take it there ever.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, as you know, I loved Alicent. I loved the nuance that they gave her character. I thought, like, what they did with her in season 1, phenomenal. I enjoyed it. And I always kind of had the expectation that there would be a point where her actions became completely irredeemable to me, but that I would still like her, like how I feel about Agatha. But they didn't quite do that. At least not yet. Where they left it kind of seems like they don't plan to. Who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. But
It doesn't look like it.
it doesn't.
One thing that I did notice, I've seen this kind of sort of circling a little bit around on social media. It's sort of centered on like parallels that you're seeing with the people that Agatha like very specifically chose. So a lot of the story that we're seeing is like she clearly wants her power back. And then when we get the backstory, we learn like there is some particular motive behind it. Remember that scene when Agatha was talking with her son in the woods, and then she starts to say things like, oh, like, I can't protect you, I can't save you, etc. And then she goes on to say, like, I can't heal you, I can't protect you.
She said something like, I can't control when she's gonna come back for you.
Yeah. So people are sort of tying that to like when she says like, you know, like, I can't heal you, you learn that like that's sort of tied to like a potions witch, which is why like we get a potions witch in the coven. And then the same thing with the protection witch, we get that in the coven as well. You can see that like the power that she's sort of seeking after is really tied to what she felt she was incapable of doing to protect her son, which I thought was kind of interesting because like even while all of that's happening, you understand that what she's doing is like extremely unethical, extremely immoral. It added that new layer to her character that made her a lot more interesting.
Yeah. What I also thought about with her was she definitely had like a scarcity mindset. Like when her son was like, couldn't we just survive with the covens instead of...
Yeah.
You can see that she doesn't have a good answer to that question, and so she kind of brushes it off. And her whole explanation about like, oh, you know, we do this so that we can survive. You definitely see, she operates as though there's not enough for everyone. Like there's not enough for everyone to thrive together. She believes that she cannot coexist with other people because there's not enough power. That's just not true, but that's definitely how she is feeling. And I honestly don't think that that is fully explained by the situation with her son. I don't think that that's fully explained by that. I think that that might just be her, and maybe the situation with her son exasperates it and makes it a little bit more like urgent. But as we see, after her son passes, she continues.
Yeah.
So it's something that is core within her.
Who's her baby daddy?
Doesn't matter. This is a story about the women.
You know what? You're right. Tuesday.
We don't care. I feel like we should talk about all of the other characters surrounding Agatha, because I think they did such a good job giving them so much depth with with so little time. And there were a lot of really, really meaningful moments. I'm gonna be very upfront. When Jennifer bound up Agatha's hands and was like, you hold nothing, you hold nothing, you hold nothing, you know, I started to cry.
Really?
Yes, I got very emotional.
I need to know why.
I don't think it was an accident that they casted a Black woman in that role. Once I realized that all of the witches were not going to survive to the end, I thought her character was going to be unalived much sooner, because she was the character that they had sort of given the least amount of depth to. At a lot of the points, she was kind of like the comedic relief. Like, we had this very tragic and traumatizing backstory with Alice and her mom. And then Lilia, there was that really intriguing idea about like what is going on with her mind.
Yeah.
And like there wasn't really anything like that for Jennifer. So I did not expect her to be the last one. I didn't expect her to live to the end. But when they got to the end, I was like, I personally understand why, and I'm very grateful. Because to have a Black woman looking a white woman in the face, a white woman who has literally taken her power, and to have her stare her down in the face and just repeatedly tell her, you hold nothing over me. Like, there is nothing that you have over me, and that you cannot defeat me. Like, I will not be defeated by you. I absolutely refuse. Magnificent. Magnificent. I thought that was so good, and I don't think it would have hit the same with any of the other characters. I think it had to be her at the end.
Yeah. It's interesting because we learned that Wiccan kind of creates this whole road thing. Like, it doesn't really exist. But Jennifer doesn't know that. There's like a portion of it that like they thought that Agatha was like better because she had been the only one to make it through the road. But in actuality, like, the playing fields were like somewhat even, right? And in some ways she had a bit of an advantage because Jen was able to escape before Agatha was able to do it. So I found it interesting that like she didn't need to find out about the truth behind everything related to the walk that they go on, because that's not where her character needed.
Yeah.
Her character really won getting her power back and then confronting the person that took that power away from her. And I felt like leaving that portion out, that was a great way to end her story.
Yeah, I agree.
They didn't hold back on Wiccan's sexuality either, which I really appreciated. One, like, he had a partner and it wasn't that like cringe stuff or like the camera pans to them like holding hands and you're just like, oh, okay. Like, they had like a full on relationship. He had like the trans flag in his room. I even read somewhere that a couple of them, that the character Wiccan and his partner, the two actors, they sort of audited the room that Wiccan was in to get a feel of like, some of these tropes or literature might be a little bit more harmful in retrospect. And so like Wiccan in like 2024 or whatever, he wouldn't have that in his room. So we should probably take this out. We should probably put this in there.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, it's just letting them read the room. I thought that was wise.
Attention to detail. I do like that. I want to talk about Lilia too. I loved Lilia's story. I thought about my mom a lot watching her scenes.
Really?
Yes. I think it's meaningful to all women, but I think it is meaningful to a specific generation of women because I think a lot of her story has to do with being discredited. And I think that is something that women experience a lot as they get older, because so much of the value that people put into women is about their youth and their beauty. Like, we talk about pretty privilege and all these things. Like, for a lot of young women, like, those are assets that they're able to use willingly or unwillingly. It's benefiting you in some way. And as you get older, you no longer have those things. And so we can like literally see in real time how women kind of get written off, the roles that they start to, like in Hollywood, like the roles that they start to be given become more and more narrow and shallow, and like we watched that happen. And so I just really appreciated her story. I appreciated the casting. I love that they casted like an older woman, and I loved this story that the angle that they took with her, that everybody around her was just kind of writing her off as like, well, that's just kooky Lilia, just like saying whatever. And come to find out, like, she was honestly the key, like she was the crucial key to this entire thing the entire time. She was the only person that had all of the pieces the entire time. And it wasn't until somebody, Jennifer, sat and listened to her and took her seriously that they were able to use what she had in order to make sense of this journey. And she saves them in the end.
Yeah. And yeah, it's true, because she's the first one to learn what Wiccan can do when she does the fortune telling at the original person's, was it like a bar mitzvah? I can't say.
It was his bar mitzvah.
Bar mitzvah, yeah. So tying that, and once we get her story, I'm like, oh, that's clever writing. I really like that.
Yes, I adored her. I really appreciated her character. A lot of Lilia's backstory, it had to do with like her own sense of insecurity. She knew that she was unable to control this thing that was happening to her, that she was living outside of time. And they talked about how the thing that I forgot that they referenced was how a big part of that was her witnessing the unaliving of her entire family or her entire coven. I can't remember which. And like the trauma of that, of like being the only person. And so she's like lonely is what it honestly seems like, which that's also a thread that ties between all of them actually, is like this kind of sense of loneliness. Like they keep referencing this idea that witches are supposed to live in covens, and none of these women do for various reasons. This final journey is one where she's able to find this community of witches that she loves and cares for, and in the end, the thing that she has been the most insecure about is the thing that allows her to save them, and she's able to accept her end. Because that was the other thing that had been haunting her, was that she had always seen her death before it happened.
Yeah.
She knew pieces about it and like was afraid of it, and she was able to embrace it and make the decision to walk into it willingly for the betterment of her community.
Even with the loneliness piece that you mentioned, we don't get that much of Aubrey Plaza's character, but you even sensed a little bit of her character as well, like this idea of death, and so people sort of keep her at a distance. And she even asked Agatha like why don't you want to be with me?
Yeah.
And you can see that like the task that she has, she is unwillingly wanting to live out her responsibilities. It's not something that she's like looking forward to doing all the time.
We didn't talk about Alice. Her trial was like, it was the physical, like literal embodiment of a generational curse that they had to defeat, which again, the casting, I just think is just so, because there is so many things that people of color inherit just through like the trauma of generations before us and the things that they have had to go through and endure. And her entire story arc was her inability to face that, to face what she had been left with and the weight of it. And the realization that she comes to in the end is that all these things that she had been avoiding, like, she didn't want to sing the song that her mom had created, like all these things that she had been avoiding were all tools that her mother had left her in her attempt to protect her. Sorry. That's just good. That is just so good. I just think that they, with every single character, they just did exactly what they needed to do.
And in a short amount of time, too.
I think the structuring of the show was really well done so that they could do this in a short amount of time. Like the trials, each being centered on a specific witch, so that they could use that specific episode to give a deep dive into that character, what they're facing, what they were motivated by. And then it's a literal trial, so they have to overcome it. I think they structured it in a way that allowed them to do a lot in a short amount of time.
Yeah. I thought the episode that Catherine has with the child who plays Agatha's son, that was some of the best chemistry I've seen in the entire history of the MCU.
It was so good. It was haunting.
I could not believe how like 15, 20 minutes of screen time, probably less than that, they were able to help really make us fall in love with this family dynamic. Yeah, I was impressed by that. And sometimes it can be a little hit or miss with the child actors, but that kid really sold it.
No, they did a very good job.
Yeah.
I also, because we didn't even talk about the final trial in the room, like in this where they had to make a plant grow, and there was like nothing there to make that happen. When she's helping Billy to find a place for Tommy to go, which that scene alone I just thought was so good, so tense.
Yeah.
And then when he asked her, like, am I making this happen? Like, am I making this boy die by trying to bring my brother into his body, like bring my brother's consciousness into his body? And then she says, no, Billy, sometimes little boys just die. Then we dive into what happened to her son. I don't know, there was something very profound about that line of like, sometimes things happen and they just are. Like, I think so, like a lot of times when people pass on, people really search to find like explanations and reasons and meaning. And I just think sometimes like that simple acceptance of like, sometimes these things just are.
Yeah.
They just happen.
Because remember, we don't get more detail about what was wrong with Agatha's son. While she was, in labor, Aubrey's character comes around and you already know what that means, but they don't give us any more insight as to what happened or why it's happening, which I think is intentional with what the point that you just brought up there.
I think it's implied that he is like sickly in some way. Yeah. But there's no reason. They're not implying that it was a punishment for Agatha, nothing like that. It just is like when she comes up, she just says it's time. And then it's that whole experience that allows for the environment to be able to inhabit growth. Just a beautiful show all around.
Yeah, we'd love to hear your thoughts. For those that did watch Agatha, let us know in the comments below. We're always excited to hear the conversations that you all can bring to the videos that we do. With that, we will see you all next time. Take care, everyone. Peace.